The rioting in our streets is a threat to all peaceful citizens, and it must be ended, and ended now. The main victims of these violent demonstrations are law-abiding African Americans who live in these communities and only want to raise their children in safety and peace and with a good education. That's what they want, and we're going to give that to them.
Good Friday afternoon to you, and welcome to America Talks Live, Hour 2, the news program designed especially for you. Your calls, questions, and comments at 1-877-NEWSMAX. That's 1-877-639-7629. J.D. Hayworth here, and together we just saw Donald Trump on the stump last night in Pennsylvania, urging an end to the street violence in Charlotte. As for the situation right now in Charlotte, it appears things are cooling down. Last night was tense, but certainly not as bad as the night before. Miranda Kahn has our update from the Newsmax TV newsroom. Miranda?
Yeah, things are calmer. Thanks, JD. North Carolina police did arrest one person linked to that shooting death, though, of another protester on Wednesday night.
Violent Criminal Apprehension Team, VCAT, just apprehended Raekwon Borum, and we'll give you more information on that, who is the suspect in the murder of Mr. Justin Carr.
Last night was the third night of protest against the police shooting death of Keith Scott. Police say Scott got out of his car holding a gun and was shot after he refused to drop that weapon. Meanwhile, the Oklahoma police officer charged with manslaughter for killing an unarmed black man surrenders to authorities. Betty Shelby turned herself in this morning just hours after she was charged in Terrence Crutcher's death. Dash cam video shows Crutcher, you can see it right there, had his hands up in the air when he was shot, but Shelby's lawyer says that she thought he was reaching into his car for a weapon. And a new McClatchy-Maris poll shows Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump has dwindled. She's currently leading him by just 6 points now, 45 to 39%. Last month, as you may recall, she led by 15. And for much more on these stories, please visit Newsmax.com. I'm Miranda Kahn. Back over to you, JD.
Thanks very much, Miranda. So, with passions in Charlotte apparently cooling, we're prompted to examine the political fallout, and to do that, I am pleased to be joined here on the anchor desk by Nancy Brinker, former ambassador to Hungary for the United States of America. We're also joined by the managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog, must reading throughout Florida. That, of course, would be Javier Manjarres. Nancy and Javi, we thank you for your time. Now, it was interesting, Ambassador, we were listening to Donald Trump, and there have been those who say that, well, 2016 resembles 1968. Trump says he's the law and order candidate. We've gotten a check on the reports of who was arrested in Charlotte. 70% of those people were out of state, non-North Carolinians going in there. Can we draw from that? Can we infer that basically George Soros and his rent-a-mob of agitators were going into North Carolina? Because, I mean, nothing went on in Oklahoma.
Well, you know, I don't know enough about it, JD, but I do know one thing. I do appreciate Donald Trump as a candidate and with his thoughts saying that this is going to end. We as Americans have to make it end. It isn't even just a problem of, you know, fake people coming in and out, renegades or whatever. It really is a problem. It's a cultural problem. And it's also a problem of discipline and order in cities and states. We have an obligation to keep our country free. We have an obligation to keep our children safe and provide good lives for the people we have. And this kind of stuff we need to fix it. We need to fix it. And I like strong leaders.
Let me turn to Javier Manjarres, who knows the political dimensions of a whole lot of things, and sadly, it looks like the left is using what happened in Charlotte as a political tool to try to generate African-American turnout in that key swing state.
First of all, remember, the police officer who shot this black individual was a black police officer. So where are they going to go from there? The bottom line is let's look who these people are, these Black Lives Matter. All they are is these self-entitled racist thugs who have no respect for themselves, let alone for anyone else. So this is what they want. They just feel like if they progress their racist views and make this about black lives, which really all lives matter, that they're going to get that extra penny at the end of the day. This is all about class. They are self-entitled. They feel like they need to get that bottom line, your penny, my penny, her penny, and no one else's.
Well, to that point, when we're talking about the triumph of the narrative, let's take a listen to the NAACP president in Charlotte, Corinne Mack. She was on CNN and she was saying that it did not matter if the man who was gunned down, Keith Scott, had a weapon or not. Listen.
But in my mind and in most of the community's mind, it really doesn't matter if he had a gun. At the end of the day, we have the right under the Second Amendment to carry here in North Carolina, and their responsibility was to engage him in a more de-escalated way, find out if he had a permit for his gun, and allow him to go on his merry way, and he would still be living today.
How do you how do you de-escalate someone when they set out to do? I kind of agree with Javier. I think that some people are just so angry they'll spend every ounce of currency they have, including other people's lives, to disrupt civil order. And it just can't be allowed. I'm sorry. This isn't a therapy. The police officers are not in place to give us therapy. Their job is to keep order and rule.
First of all, I would like to know how the cops are supposed to let this guy go with a gun in his hand. Were they supposed to ask him to hand it over to him or wrestle the guy with it? How do they know the guy wasn't going to pull the gun, which he did, and actually shoot the police officer? It makes sense whatsoever.
And it's very distracting, to your point, unfortunately, very distracting from the real issues, which are these races, these Senate races in these states that are coming up. I heard, I was with Richard Burr last week from North Carolina, and these, people who are honestly trying very hard to be good public servants, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, Rob Portman in Ohio, these are people who are some of our best public servants, and these issues cloud the things they're trying to do to get reelected to serve us in a much better way and fix these problems.
But that's what works for the Democrats, divisive politics, because that's what matters to them. That's the only way they're going to win elections, because they can't win on the issues.
That's true.
To that point, again, we invite your calls at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629, and as if to bear electronic witness to what you both are saying, take a listen to Hillary Clinton and the rhetoric she's been using.
There is still much we don't know about what happened in both incidents, but we do know that we have 2 more names to add to a list of African Americans killed by police officers in these encounters. It's unbearable, and it needs to become intolerable.
How will she be, if she's elected president, how will she be able to go to the memorial for fallen law enforcement officers in Washington and give a speech with a straight face? After siding always with Black Lives Matter and with people in the community who sadly don't seem to be able to comply with the police officers' instructions.
It's a terrible, these are difficult and terrible issues to deal with. And the fact that we are talking about Black Lives Matter, Hispanic Lives Matter, White lives matter. Every single person in our country came as an immigrant sometime in their lives. This should not be about culture, but there have been problems of great problems in the African American culture. We have all recognized that. And these are issues that are going to come up from time to time. But the issue is get a hold of it. Get a hold of it and do what the police officers need to do. Watch them carefully. They shouldn't be running around shooting people randomly. Of course not. But how many funerals are we going to want to go to? That's the issue.
You don't hear her speak about all the police officers who are killed every year in the line of duty, who are shot, who are run over. Only the few that, there are a few bad apples, that do make mistakes, but for the most part, I think most police officers, whether they're black, white, Chinese, or purple, they're good to do people, and they're doing the right thing in protecting our sovereignty.
Again, the number 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Now, Hillary Clinton's approach on police enforcement, law enforcement's one thing, but where she is headed in terms of taxation is another. She has uttered that she wants the estate tax, the death tax, at a rate of 65%. So this is very curious because we've been hearing that so many high-income voters are peeling away from the Republicans to go to Hillary Clinton. Nancy, is this going to throw cold water on that?
It's going to throw, you know what, I hope people read this language. It is, look, there are a lot of people in any country that you look at. There are always certain people who maybe they've made an awful lot of money and maybe they didn't do it just exactly by code. But you know what? There is a very sincerely competent group of people in this country who have created enormous wealth, not just for themselves, but for other country and our people. And to do that, this is a capitalist society. It is a risk-reward issue. What about the money they invested to make the money so that other people have jobs?
And
where do jobs come from
we are
if they
going
don't
to
come from people
that's
who
right.
take the risk to do them?
And
a 65% estate tax is confiscatory when you
Just think.
consider that you paid already 4 other taxes to get there.
And on top of that, to think that when I was on the Ways and Means Committee, we actually we put the death tax to death, albeit for a year. Let's go to the phones because we want to open our calls. Curtains on the death tax, but we raise the curtain and offer our salutation to Charles, who is calling in from Boise, Idaho. Hiya, Charles. Welcome to America Talks Live.
Hi, how you doing?
Doing fine, thanks.
Okay, I wanted to make one short point. Donald Trump wants to be president. I really believe in him. My point is, we had the Civil Conservation Corps, the CCC, when we had the Depression, because everybody was out of work, everybody was losing their homes. If you put that back in place right here, right now, every able-bodied man, you want a check, you're going to have to work for it. We have bridges, rivers, we have Louisiana that's underwater, we have parts of Texas. If you take all these people that are standing around looting, crying the blues, collecting a check, go to work. 2/3 of your check goes home to keep a roof and the bills
And
paid.
you know, Charles, we don't even have to go back to FDR and the Conservation Corps. The fact is, again, as part of a Republican Congress with a well, actually, no, we got Bill Clinton to sign the legislation. We had a situation where you had a time limit on welfare, you get a couple of years, and then you had to go to work. And what we saw were the welfare rolls declining and people going to work. So if you've got to get people back to work, as Charles says.
And I have one, Charles, you're so right, and I have one other comment to add, is that when people are busy working and they're building in their own communities, they're building infrastructure. Look at WPA. I had somewhere a grandfather or someone who worked in WPA. These people, it was after the war, people had pride in our country. Someone who takes part in building bridges and buildings and towns doesn't blow them up. Okay?
And that is very true. What does happen to us in television is there's always that high wire act of time. That don't worry, Javi, we're going to get you in on this. They're going to stay with us, and we're going to take more of your calls, too, at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. We're talking down ticket. We appreciate the comments from Charles in Boise. Looking for your comments, too. We've got Javi and Nancy and you on America Talks Live, Hour 2 here on Newsmax TV.
Now, having said all this, why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask?
Whoa! Welcome back to America Talks Live. And you'll probably want to call and comment about that interesting on-camera presentation by Hillary Clinton. The number 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. This is a shout-free zone here at the anchor desk. Well, let's do it Hillary style. I'm here to welcome to the program former American ambassador to Hungary and host of Conversations with Nancy Brinker right here on Newsmax TV, Nancy Brinker. And see, I gotta cut that. But that was just kind of curious. And returning to more conversational tone, the managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog, Javier Manjarres. I don't know what was going on, Nancy. I don't know if they taped that in front of a crowd, but
it was just, wow.
I mean, what's the deal?
It just was I don't know. It was an outlash, and the fact is, I think the race is tightening up. I mean, it is clearly tightening up, and I think the debate is going to be an amazing opportunity for us to see a lot. And I think Americans, people I've visited with in the last 4 or 5 months around the country, they really, really want change. And I hope one of these candidates will emerge with the change, being the change, and having people believe that, because we need it. We need to heal in our country. We've had a lot of stuff go on.
Well, when I look at what happened there, Javi, it was as if Hillary, usually she comes out, it's as if she's taken her vocal lessons, a well-modulated voice, and there she is screaming. What's the deal?
I think she's just frustrated because, like, she wants Americans to see who Donald Trump really is. She thinks that's she's going to defeat him that way. But I think Americans already know who she is. And Americans want someone who's going to stand up against thugs, tyrants, the Putins of the world. Donald Trump can do that. From the looks of it, Hillary Clinton has trouble standing up on her own to begin with. So what's say she can stand up to, or she can stand up to someone like Putin? People see that. Americans see that.
Obviously, grist for the mill, food for thought. Subject of phone calls coming up at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. As a matter of fact, let's go back to the phones right now to Vienna, Virginia, where Al is on the line. Al, welcome to America Talks.
Thank you.
Go right ahead, sir.
And his wife, Rosemary.
Oh, we got a tag team. Al and Rosemary. It's so good to have you. What's on your mind?
Well, last night we watched Michael Savage on Newsmax, and he was saying they were promoting his book, but then he said that on the election day, Hillary Clinton has a Spanish company counting the votes. They're going to be electronically counted. And he was saying that she's so dishonest and evil that we cannot trust her to count the votes. And we'd like to tell Donald Trump to change that part of the election.
Well,
let him oversee how the votes get counted.
You know, Rosemary, you raise a very interesting point. It has been reported even in the cable news world where you've actually had hackers come in and change the election information. And then the other wrinkle that our caller didn't mention is the talk that the Department of Homeland Security may say every state's electoral apparatus is critical infrastructure and try to intervene for the safety and integrity of the program. When I hear that, Javi, and knowing that J rhymes with May, Johnson runs that, I'm more than a little nervous.
Right, I've heard a lot that a George Soros company out of Spain is going to be, I don't know how that's going to happen, but again, this is...
Well, they provided the equipment,
right,
apparently.
well, and somehow they're going to count that. I don't know how that's going to happen. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think at the end of the day, the Democrats will do whatever they can to rig this election and win it at all costs. Hopefully, Trump will prevail. Not so much Donald Trump. I hope Americans will prevail. If Donald Trump wins, America prevails.
Donald's made a lot. I agree with you. Donald has done a lot to get people focused on the rigging piece of all this, how it can happen, and I just hope that it's lightened that up in people's minds and they're watching for it, and not just them, but regulators and people who are supposed to be watching this stuff are looking carefully at it.
And of course, Florida, I think, has gone a long way to solve its problems after 2000 in a bipartisan way. But there's still a lot of talk of states, not only Virginia, we heard from Al and Rosemary, but also Ohio. Now, what's interesting about Ohio, you just got back from the Buckeye State. My old House colleague, now U.S. Senator Rob Portman, in a race with Ted Strickland. The early thinking was that, oh, man, it's going to be tough for Rob Portman to survive. You never take anything for granted, especially if Soros machines are being used to tabulate votes. But it appears that Rob has opened up a fairly comfortable margin.
Well, he has, and I again, there's nothing like being on the ground campaigning, and I had probably one of the best times of my life campaigning with both of them. They're honest, authentic, hardworking people. He has closed probably 50 pieces of legislation in his term, as well as being extremely prepared to be a senator of Ohio. It's a huge state. It's a pinnacle of the race. It's incredible, and they have done a great job, and you could feel it. You could feel it, not just because I was with Portman voters, but reading all the newspapers and magazines and listening to all the social media and watching it and everything. I think that he's going to have a decisive win.
He may well have a decisive win, but will the Republicans retain the Senate? It looks pretty dicey to me. It looks like even McCain may lose his seat in Arizona. Rubio should win it, but also his seat in Florida. But what about Toomey in Pennsylvania?
And I have a beef about that too. I was at a meeting that was a fundraising meeting for some senators, and they said, look, it looks like it could be 49-49, like that was a good thing. And I asked the question, that's a good thing? You want it to be like that?
Well, only if you have a Republican vice president, Mike Pence, who can come in and break the ties.
Yeah.
We were talking about Rob Portman. Let's listen to Senator Portman in his own words from Ohio.
I'm hopeful that people are paying attention this year because it's an important race. It may well determine sort of the direction of the country. Will we have the right checks and balances in Washington? Probably This election will be important to determining whether the majority shifts in the Congress or not.
Little known fact, there's Mrs. Portman from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. It's kind of interesting how we get around the country.
Now, she's fantastic.
She
And
sure
you know
is.
how he got her? He asked her to marry him, and she said, I'll become a Republican, because she was working for a Democrat at the time, if you'll become a Methodist.
Well,
And that
there
was
you
the
have
deal
it.
she struck with
See,
him
really.
30 years ago. I said, smart girl.
Yeah, but 30 years of Democrats are whole different people.
That's
than
right,
they
they've
are
changed
now.
now.
The party was
Right,
completely
Javi.
different than it is now.
That's exactly
Javi,
right. That's what she said.
Let me get back to the Florida Senate race,
Right.
because you cover that for Shark Tank Political Blog. And I got to tell you, when Marco decided to get in the primary late, I think a lot of people thought, well, this is going to be tough. But boy, he won the primary decisively. And now in this general election, what's your take on the dynamic at work there?
Well, it's going to be close either way you look at it, but he will defeat Patrick Murphy. Patrick Murphy's in line with President Obama's entire agenda, and that's been working against him, like it has worked against the president. Marco will win, and depending on what happens regardless of what happens in the White House, who wins the White House, I think Marco will be the big figure with Ted Cruz in the Senate, and how things work out. Regardless, also if they they keep the majority or not.
Well, it's sure important to keep the majority, but rules in the Senate do allow the ultimate minority, a minority of one, to make a difference there. Tell you what, we've got one phone call from a gentleman we want to get to now from Detroit. It's Charlie on the line. Charlie, thanks for taking time to call America Talks Live.
It's Charlie and
This is Charlie in Detroit. Had Charlie in Boise. To Detroit. Hi, Charlie.
Is this for me?
It is for you, brother.
I'm in Philadelphia, unfortunately. I know she said Detroit.
Well, let's get that straight. From the city of brotherly love. Give us some brotherly love, Charlie. Your perspective.
Fortunately,
Go
we
ahead.
haven't been part of the troublemaking going on in the other cities. But my point, I have a couple points to make, both about Hillary and Donald. I think people that I know have been a little bit upset over some of the things that have been going on, statements made by Donald about the police officer. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but have him commenting on this thing before the facts are in, and Hillary herself making statements that are ridiculous. And I'm really concerned that no one has ever talked about Hillary's situation as to why she established her campaign, her fund over out of the country. Why? No one ever asked her, why wouldn't she set that up in the United States if it's a nonprofit?
You know, you asked a very good question, Charlie, and I love that mid-Atlantic accent. I won't ask Charlie to say water, but you know, it's great. The Philadelphians got that, and great cheesesteaks too in Philadelphia. Thanks for the call, Charlie. Very quickly, Nancy, the notion of women running, you know, because Hillary is insulated a bit with all her wrongdoing. Oh, you don't want to beat up on the lady. Some effective Republican women are getting on the ticket now. 20 seconds. Kelly Ayotte, what are her chances in New Hampshire?
She's got a very tough race. We need to have Kelly Ayotte win. If you know anybody in New Hampshire, I'm openly politicking for her. I have my friends in the Senate, I'm out there, and I want everybody to be out there. She is one of the most effective women senators, period, both parties that we have. And if we lose her, that means we'll have, what, 4 or only 5 women, Republican women senators. That's wrong. And I'm going to really try to work to do something about that.
I'm all for more women than send a bunch of ugly dudes there right now.
Well, that's something we might agree with. At any rate,
gosh.
we are pleased to have the lovely Nancy Brinker here with us and Javier Manjarres. We're coming back with more on America Talks Live.